Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, founder of a revolutionary medical sales training and mentorship program called the Medical Sales Career Builder, and I'm also host of the Medical Sales Podcast. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire world. It doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing and diagnostic lab, you name it, you will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 10% performer within your role, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. And remember, I am a medical sales expert sharing my own opinion about this amazing industry and how it can change your life. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us another special guest, and he goes by the name of TJ Quigley. TJ is Director of Marketing at Fisher & Paykel, a healthcare company that makes products in the respiratory space. In this episode, we go deep into what it means to be in this kind of space as a rep, from med device to the supply side, what it means to get access to make business work, and of course, what it means to be in marketing, especially in this digital era in 2024, where so much business happens online. This is the kind of episode you don't want to miss. Make sure you tune in, pay attention. If you're someone that wants to get into medical sales, you got to hear this. If you're someone in medical sales, you got to hear this. And if you're someone that just likes good content, you got to hear this. As always, we're doing our best to bring you innovative guests that do differently in the medical sales space, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Wow, that's cool. Is that something like you've thought about doing on your own, a hobby, or you just...
Time is crazy. I'm in marketing, right? So it's like with 2 kids and a wife, not a lot of spare time to dive into it. I've dabbled in Bleacher Report a little bit to do some kind of stuff on that as far as sports are concerned for the
Okay.
LA Chargers and stuff like that. So
Wait. So you
yeah,
did a podcast for the LA Chargers?
yeah. So I've done
Wait,
some
you gotta
stuff.
tell me
Yeah.
about that. What happened? What was that about?
No, it's just there's a bunch of there's a guy on there right now called the director that does most of the stuff for Bleacher Report for the Chargers and stuff.
Okay,
And I've sat in on a couple of them and I've worked with them on a couple things and
that's
stuff
awesome.
like that. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so we're gonna do this a couple different ways. We're gonna get into everything about you, a little bit about your company, if it's okay, and then mainly about your role. But before we even get into like the official line of questioning, talk to me about your position. When I think marketer, when I think your company, I think that you're responsible for the image that this company is trying to represent online, offline, everywhere.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that you are probably spending more time online driving the narrative for that image than any other space. Fill in the gaps, correct me on whatever I said that may be out of place.
Yeah, no, I think the key thing with, as a senior marketing kind of strategist, right? There's a lot that goes into that. So you're completely right. Online is a big focus on that, but I like to say it kind of depends, right? It depends on who you're trying to get to, right?
Yeah.
Some docs or nurses or individuals spend more time online than others. And
Okay.
so that's the beauty of online, right? I can target people that I want to target to get the narrative to them, to get the message to them that I want, maybe to reach them, to invite them to a conference, or just to bring kind of a disease state to their front of mind. If you're talking to an ED doc, right? Their whole goal in life is to triage the patients and get them out, right? Get them somewhere else. They don't have a lot of time for this. They're getting bombarded by marketers like me all the time. So
Yep.
you've got to be very clear, concise, and can you distill it, that complex, whatever it is, complex procedure or complex medical device, into something so that it drives value for them. So that's kind of the big challenge, and it's a very iterative process, right?
Yeah.
From what I've learned is, you got to test it. We're going to talk more about it later, but I'm a big believer in the old school thinking. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? And that goes big time with marketing, right? You got to be able to measure things. And that is key for online, especially, right? When I got to do my year-end review of my budget and how it went and why do I need more or less, I better have been updating people on the successes, and then also maybe some of the ones that didn't work out so well, and
Yeah.
and why didn't they go well, and how did we pivot accordingly.
Okay. So, our audience, a bunch of people are in medical sales in our audience, and just to be specific, they're on the sales side, the commercial side,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I know that the relationship between marketing and commercial is there, but some companies it's a beautiful symphony, and some companies it's, I don't like that person, right? So I don't know what it is where you are, but we also have a lot of people that are not in the industry that listen to us that want to get into
Hmm.
the industry, so they really don't have any context around what
Yep.
we're talking about right now. So let's go back to a 30,000 foot view. What
Yep.
are you responsible for? Why does your company, well, introduce your company and your name. I'll let you do the honors in a second.
Yep.
But after you do that, explain what you are doing for your company from a 30,000 foot view and what you're
Yep.
responsible for driving.
Yep. I'm gonna kind of do it like a little
Sure.
twofold, if that's okay, with marketing and sales and kind of how they cross over, because I think that's where you see the success, as you were alluding to earlier. So like marketing builds awareness, drives interest, and creates demand, and then sales has to convert that demand into revenue, right? So that's like kind of like a high level 30,000 foot view of what we're going to do, right? And so, how is marketing kind of approaching that? It's like I, as a marketer, have to understand the market, just like I was talking about ED docs and their time, and what do they need? What does that ED doc need, for example? And then how do I help the salespeople communicate those kind of value props? Because for people that don't know about selling to doctors or trying to get into medical device, right? The days of features and benefits sales are over. You really got to come in and drive and drill into that value prop of what you're doing to help either increase workflow. Am I reducing cost? Am I improving patient care? Whatever it is, I got to come in and help the sales team come up with a message and do it. And so it's like a two-way street, right? It's not me just coming up with the message with the team and then sending it over the fence and say good luck, right? I got to be out in the field with those salespeople to see what's working, because it may sound good at the
But
office,
it
may
doesn't,
sound great,
not
right?
resonating.
And then
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
out there and they look at me, they're like, "What kind of BS are you trying to sell me
Right.
here?" Right? Like,
So,
like,
so
come
let,
on.
let's qualify that a little better though, because I hear that a lot. I know that. I know exactly what you're talking about. But again, I want to do it for the audience. So you said that the days of features and benefits selling are over, and
Yep.
now it's much more about what is me as a customer. What is the specific value proposition you're trying to help me see? Qualify that a little bit more. Give
Yep.
us a little bit more
So,
example of how it's changed.
so, um, the the big shift that's happened in healthcare kind of happened around 2008, 2009, right? If we're going to go back in the day, right? Prior to then, money was very plentiful in the healthcare industry. There was money everywhere, right? You could walk in as a sales rep, say I've got the new greatest feature. It's got this laser, it's got this HD or whatever it is, and they
Mhm.
they would sign up for it, right?
Sure.
After that, money dried up. People realized, man, we're just pumping money into this healthcare, and it's not getting us any returns. It's not working how we want. We're losing money, and they started looking at that. Plus, at the same time, a lot of these docs used to be kind of sole proprietors, and now they've kind of shifted away to where they're actually employees of the hospital.
Mhm.
So instead of the docs being the ones that are making the decisions now, 9 times out of 10, you go in and you're bringing a product in there that's over $5,000, let's say, it's going to go to an executive committee to approve. The doc can't make a decision on that, right? And so you've got to be able to convince the doc that they want to do it. And then you got to give the doc data, information, whatever it is, so that they can present it to the committee, because they don't want us presenting it. They want the doc to talk about, why is this so important and why do I have to do this? And these committees' goals are all about putting you into a box, right? Can I put you into this box and then lower the price as much as possible? So if I come in and just do features and benefits, I'm not going to get in there. I'm not going to sell it. They're going to be like, this isn't valuable. I got to figure out what is the value driver that is going to move the needle, so that, for lack of a better term, these bean counters can understand from a clinical
Yeah.
perspective
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what value this is bringing to the hospital. And that is really tough to do, especially when these bean counters, as I was talking about earlier, they don't understand the clinical side, right? And then vice versa, the doc doesn't understand the business side,
Right.
right?
Right.
So we're like these intermediaries trying to help them, educate them, get them up to speed so that they can talk clearly, concisely to these bean counters
I love it. I love it.
on these
Man,
executive committees.
that was gold the way you lay that out. Like that was crystal clear. Okay. So let's talk about it. So basically you're saying it's a multifaceted effort now. And you have to hit at all these channels to even get a seat at the table. Give us, walk us through how your company makes that happen. What does a team look like for commercial? What's the makeup? Who's doing what? How do
Yep.
you drive that with Fisher and Paykel?
Yep. So you've gotta take a look at like the sales rep is definitely the first line of defense is the way I like to call it, right? They're the ones that are living and breathing on the floor, on the hospital floor. They might be going into the ED, they might be going into the ICU, they might be going into the PICU, right? From a pediatric perspective. So they're the ones that are kind of going in that side, right? And then you've got kind of marketing helping them, right? Trying to support them with the messaging, with the tools, with the collateral, the presentations, all that stuff we're helping them with, hitting them from the bottom. And then there's kind of like the top side as well. So another angle, if you're just getting the sales rep pushing up from the bottom, you might get some activity,
Yep.
but you also have to do kind of a top down approach. And that's where these corporate accounts teams come together, right? And what they're doing is they're heading on kind of that level above that executive committee. They're kind of coming in and they're establishing those relationships with them. They're walking them through quarterly business reviews, kind of walking through here's how much spend you've got, here's what you've done, that whole kind of thing. That's again driving awareness of this. I've had an example where we had a rep that was just banging their head into the ground trying to get into Cleveland Clinic. Years and years and years, wasn't moving the needle. It's a very tough hospital system to get into. It took the corporate accounts individual talking to their contact over there, going through a business review. They did a double take. What do you mean we're spending $5 million on you? We had no idea that we were doing
Wow.
that.
Wow.
We're
Wow.
spending $5 million and I had no idea. That's a problem. And
Yeah.
what else do you do? What
Yeah.
else do you? Oh, well, we also do anesthesia. We do urology. We do all of these different.
Right.
Oh man, I didn't know that. So then we came in and literally did a product fair for them, for that executive committee that I was talking about.
Wow. So
And so that's that two-prong approach that I was talking about, right? You're hitting them from the bottom, so you're
yeah.
driving so that you've got the support of the docs, but at the same time, you got to hit them from the top down so there's awareness of what you're doing and how you're trying to drive change in clinical practice.
Beautiful. Now let's stick with that example, Cleveland Clinic.
Yep.
So how difficult was it to get an opportunity to let them know that they're spending too much money in this area and they need to make some changes?
Life's all about timing, right? 95% of the stuff is about timing. There was a new buyer that came in, and usually that's a good thing or it could be a bad thing depending on the relationship that you've had with that particular individual that had the role beforehand. In this case, we were a little worried. She had a background of being pretty tough at some other systems out there, and we were a little worried about kind of what it was going to look like. Um, and so we were a little nervous going into the meeting. So from a marketing perspective, I kind of helped set up the deck, and we worked through kind of the key messaging that we wanted to go through. And um, this was again a conversation where you're shifting away from this products and features and benefits kind of stuff, and we had to drive into the value. Like, what are we doing as a company to bring that value? Came in, gave that presentation. It was literally a half an hour, and I think, like I said, the jaw dropped on like
Wow.
$5 million. We had no idea. And we thought it was a bad thing. Like I thought it was a bad thing based off of the reaction that we saw, because it was like, I'm spending $5 million. I had no idea I was spending, and you do this and that. We're like, oh no,
So,
right?
so was this accurate, the 5 million that you guys discovered, or was this more of a generalization based on whatever data you could get about the Cleveland Clinic, or well, you
No,
knew for sure?
yeah, it was accurate. It was off of our own internal data what our spend was there.
Wow.
So we knew what they were spending. But that's what a lot of people don't realize. These buyers don't always go into the details too much. You know what I mean? A lot of times these products are siloed into different groups. So you may have a buyer that's just focused on ortho, or you may have a buyer that's just focused on surgical or whatever it is. They don't necessarily always talk. And so when I came in to talk to this buyer and it was just for surgical, but I also showed the other stuff, that's that's when you know you got a good buyer. And she's like, oh, we gotta talk about this because
Sure.
I want to make sure we're leveraging everything that you guys can offer. And more importantly, as a buyer, right, they want bulk deals, right? So if they're just looking at it as a silo and it's 600,000, but then you look at the bigger pie and now it's 5 million. Well, now we've got some more negotiation leverage on kind of what we're going to do. So kind of open up the pie for everybody.
For that example, who's the ultimate decision maker in a scenario like what you just described?
Yep. Usually it's the buyer. To be honest with you, sometimes those buyers are on committees, and there's like a super buyer, for lack of a better
Right.
term,
Sure. Yeah.
that's the boss that's kind of overlooking all of those different silos, all those different product groups that I was talking about earlier. But usually it's going to be the buyer. They're going to make a decision on that. And so that's kind of why it's so important that when you have these corporate accounts individuals, that they're focusing in on building those relationships with the buyers, and more importantly, that they don't like surprises, right? Like that's the
Right.
biggest thing that I've learned with this is I've seen situations where we didn't show the $5 million, right? We just showed the $600,000. And then they found out that we were spending $5 million. That didn't go as well. That was not a good. So I think
Yeah.
being as
Yeah.
clairvoyant, being as upfront as you can be with these buyers and
Yeah.
just walking them through it, I think is the best way to approach it.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. Okay, so then now we can kind of really see the difference between selling some of the features and benefits and getting to the heart of an issue and letting them know that, hey, we're here to save your issue. When you normally get the attention of a buyer with any potential customer, is it easy to close when you show them what you showed something like the Cleveland Clinic? I guess what I want to know is the challenge trying to get the time to show Cleveland Clinic what you showed them, or is the challenge still delivering the proposition that's going to be enough urgency for them to want to take action?
So you hit the nail on the head, man. So it's like getting that meeting, like you said, like you were teeing up a little earlier. That's
That's the challenge.
that's a good big hard part of that, right? If they don't see any value, they're not going to take the time to meet with you, and then all right, then it's falling on deaf ears, and we're not doing it. But then the flip side's going to be all right, cool. I get that meeting. Um, Marketing and sales, we all put this deal together, we put this deck together, and I've presented it before and it falls on deaf ears. They're like, we don't, I'll just use an example, right? We don't have leak rates here. We don't have any leaks when we do our anastomosis. So, why are you talking to me about a product that's going to reduce my leak rates? You don't know anything.
Sure.
We left that meeting feeling like the dumbest people in the world. So you know what we did, right? What is marketing supposed to do? Marketing's supposed to go back and look at the data, right? Help with the data. We went back, we got an agreement with Definitive and started diving into these accounts. So if we're going to come in and present this value differentiator that I'm talking about, we better know for sure that they got leaks at these hospitals, right? Otherwise, I'm talking on deaf ears. I mean,
Right.
I didn't expect the buyer to know that, right? It just so happened that this buyer had a surgical or a clinical background and knew kind of a little bit about that and was like, no, that ain't
Yeah.
moving the needle. I'm not spending $120,000 for that tower, for example, right? Like,
Wow.
so I would say it can kind of go both ways, right? And especially with a system, right? Like you've got all these systems where you've got one hospital where you could get in, you can have this conversation with the buyer there. And if you're showing success, right? Maybe you're driving more efficiency. Maybe you were able to get with quality and show how this reduced the amount of length of stay for pneumonia patients, whatever it is. If you can show that in that one system, then it can blow up out of there very quickly because these buyers talk to each other in these systems, right? So it may be just for Baycare in Tampa, right? Baycare's got 10 other systems all throughout Florida. All right, cool. Once they showed success there, then they start talking and it kind of blows up from there.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So going back to getting their attention,
Yep.
what has been how has things changed and first of all say if things haven't or have not changed. How have things changed pre and post COVID when it
Yep.
comes to securing that meeting to make the case?
Yeah, they don't want to see us.
They've never wanted
So
to, though, right? Like they've never
they
wanted
never did, but I think, it's kind of like you hear Amazon's going back to the office full time, right? And everybody doesn't want to go back to the office. It's the same kind of scenario here, right? Like they have their businesses. They used to, I would say pre-COVID, you used to see where you had buyers more aligned by product groups, right?
to.
So you had a buyer that was in charge of GYN, ortho, surgical, video, like a bunch of them. And kind of post-COVID, coming out of that, these hospitals had to tighten up belts and stuff. Now a lot of these buyers are managing multiple categories. So they just don't have time. I mean, it's hard, right? It's hard. Thousands and thousands of SKUs that they got to manage, right? And I'm just one little
One
piece of
guy
that,
trying to
right?
get
Trying to
his
get
voice
that
heard.
mind
Yeah,
share,
yeah, yeah,
trying to
yeah.
get that mind share. So from a marketing perspective, one of the biggest things that I've realized that has been super helpful is just putting together a little one pager to
Okay.
help leave behind. And I call it a value analysis brief. And why has this been so successful? A lot of times we'll go in, we'll talk to them, they'll look at you, maybe they're picking up 5% of what I'm putting down, and then you leave, right? And then what happens? Well, I have a cool little value analysis brief that I'll leave behind that just highlights the top 3 things related to what we talked about. Here's how it's going to move the needle for your hospital. And more importantly, this is how it's going to save you money or whatever it is, right? In the long run, this is what it's going to do. They look at that. That stays on their table. It's
Right.
kind of old school. I know we kicked this off with talking about digital, and there's definitely a part for digital. But again, having it on just like one page, the rep can go in and talk to it. It can be a leave behind so that they can talk through it. Yeah, there's a concern that a competitor will pick it up, and you're like, I'm giving out my secret sauce here. Well, it's not so secret. This is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're going to save you money. Let's get on board. And so we've seen a lot of success by doing that, at keeping it top of mind and having it a cool breakout. Also done some cool little boxes, where you stuff in, if it's a consumable, you make a little box, it costs about $20-$30, and you leave it behind, and you open it up, and there's the product and maybe a couple of those value analysis briefs and things. I've gone back to hospitals like 4 or 5 years later. They still have that box on their desk, right? So little things like that, that's what you got to do, right? To think about how you're going to increase that mind share, how you're going to make sure they remember it, is coming in and giving something that's going to make you stand apart, right? Just like everything in life. But it's driving that insight so that they really care. I'm not just coming in and just saying, our product's going to save you thousands of dollars. It's like, look, I looked at your data. You got some pretty high leak rates over the last 3 years. I think this product can make a difference. Let me walk you through that. That's a much better conversation than just coming in, oh, I can eliminate your leak rates here, right? That doesn't move the needle. But if you come in with that insight, it makes a big difference.
That's well said. Okay. So then what you basically shared is that your customers are looking for you. Like they're trying to find a meeting with you because your sales rep has left this incredibly insightful lead behind that's garnered some interest, and now they're like, let's have a meeting, TJ. Let's get together. That's how it's been going.
Yep.
Okay.
It can be, and it's also, again, it is not just the rep chirping in, it's also the clinical side, right? So if it's just the rep getting this meeting and they're driving it, I'd say your hit rate's going to be 20% if you're lucky,
okay.
maybe lower.
You
need to have the clinical support.
Or?
And then this is where the magic happens. And this is where it's the hard part, right? Every hospital is different, right? I've tried to replicate the success that I've seen in Baycare, I've seen at Cleveland Clinic, and it doesn't work. It's not turnkey, right? Sometimes you'll go into a hospital and you run into this individual that's worked there for 35 years. They're retiring in a year and they don't care. They're not changing anything, right? It happens, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean it's not going to happen? No, that just means you got to find another champion at the hospital can do that.
Right.
And it could be anybody. I've seen a nurse do it. I have seen a medical director do it, be super helpful. Usually ED docs won't do it because they're so busy. So don't waste your time there. Level up a little bit and go to the medical director, try to find them.
Who from your company is the person doing, not the sales rep? Who from your company
sales
is
rep.
making?
Sales rep's
still
doing
the sales rep.
Okay. Yeah, still the sales rep. Because they're, again, right, like I'm giving them the collateral and they're going out there, but they still got to find that person in the hospital that's going to move the needle, right? Quality is another big one. Like I did not think quality was going to be the one that was going to push this deal across the finish line.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it did, because what they were trying to do is to reduce the length of stay for pneumonia patients. I was just sitting there talking about the initiative that we were trying to do in the ED, and the quality person overheard it. She's like, wait a minute, could this work for, do you have anything that shows how this could reduce the length of stay for pneumonia patients? And we're like, yeah, no problem. Boom. That became a quality initiative. You want to talk about how successful that was?
Right.
That was awesome.
Right.
So I think that's a big disconnect that a lot of these companies I see, right? Because I spend a lot of time in the ED in the field. You see the rep, they come in, they talk to the ED doc, and then they leave. One of the best advice I got from a sales rep in Chicago. I was doing a ride along with him, and we came into the office or into the hospital in the back, parked on the back. Went through the hospital, did our stuff, blah 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 blah. And if you know how hospitals are, right? They're like
Yep.
mazes, man. You get
Yep.
lost all the time. So we
All the
went
time.
out like the front. We went out the front,
Right. Right.
right? And I'm like, why did we go out the front? Did you get lost? He's like, no, TJ. You never know who you're going to run into in a hospital. And if I go in and out the same place that I came in and came out, I ain't going to run into anybody different. So I always
Wow.
make sure that I come into one end and go out the other. Next hospital we went to, we ran into the doc that he's been trying to get in front of for
Wow.
3 months, right? Little things like that is what I'm noticing that are making the difference. Is like you gotta try to spread the awareness of your product, not just to the buyer or just to that one person, to that one doc. You gotta get a lot of people on board because you just don't know who that champion's going to be.
These days, everyone is making the decision. Everyone is making the decision.
It's
That
a
is
total
fantastic.
consensus, right? These
Yeah.
committees that I was
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
it could be a nurse on that committee, it could be a doc on that committee, it could be a bean counter on these committees. They're making decisions about this. How are you making sure that your product's at the top of mind when they're going through it?
When did you have this experience with this rep?
Oh, this is like 5 or 6 years ago.
Where is this rep now?
Oh, he's still there. Still there.
Okay.
He's successful, kicking
Okay.
butt, taking
Okay.
names. Like,
Hey,
I
it
love
is
the
what
guy.
it is. It is what
Absolutely
it is.
fantastic.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight then. It sounds like you're still saying that well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority
Yep.
of your marketing efforts are field-based movements, meaning you're utilizing the sales team to get the right lead behind in front of the right person, to find who that right person is, and to pretty much put together the team of right people that you can get into a conversation with to leverage whatever and close a deal. That's what's
I mean,
going on.
I would say that's about half, right?
Okay,
That
so
that's about
50%.
half.
What makes up the other
50%.
50%?
That would be about 50%. The
Okay.
other 50% is that kind of demand generation, that stuff that I was talking about earlier. So shows, right? People are coming back to conventions now. That wasn't happening for a while.
Right.
However, it's completely different. You asked post COVID, right? It's completely different now than it was before COVID,
Okay.
right? Before COVID, you'd set up a booth. People would come to the booth. Maybe I'll have a KOL giving a quick speech, and then uh, the traffic at the booth was a lot more. I just have not seen it come back at all.
Wow.
Our traffic in our booths have plummeted. I'm talking like we're spending, $200,000-$300,000, and I've got 20 leads.
Wow.
Like what? So that's a big problem from a society perspective.
Yeah.
But then that also puts the onus on me as a marketer on figuring out how do I drive traffic to the booth, because otherwise we're not getting leads.
So when
So
you
some of that,
hold
go
that
ahead.
thought, don't forget what you were going to say. But when you say drive traffic to the booth, you're talking about getting more people to show up at the convention period, or you're talking about whatever traffic exists, getting them to go to your booth.
The latter, right? So getting them that are there to come to the booth. There are so many, again, kind of like the same problem that we're experiencing with the field is like there's so much noise and so many people trying to get your mind share.
Yeah.
The same thing's happening at these things. How do I give them a reason to come to the booth, right?
Yeah.
How do I give them a reason to want to go to the booth?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And what are some of the things that I've had success with? So some of the things I've had success with from a marketing perspective, we've put some like they weren't invisible, but like invisible steps that you had to do to get to the booth. We put it in a backdrop, right? So everybody got a backdrop. In there, I had these glasses that could only see this little path that guided them to the booth, and we had a
Tell
cool
me
little
that
thing like that.
works.
It totally worked. That was a great one, right? That was awesome.
Where did that idea come
Uh,
from?
we did one earlier where we sent them 3D glasses to come experience 3D, and I said, "Whoa, wouldn't it be cool as if we could?" And that worked great. I'm like, "Wouldn't it be great if we could just put these little stickers on the ground that provide a path to our booth?" And
Wow.
then we worked with the society, and they did that. It wasn't cheap, but I think it worked. It was really cool.
Yeah.
You'd see people walking around with the glasses on and stuff like that. So that was a fun one.
Okay.
Having a I learned very quickly having, coffee on the booth is great, but Didn't move the needle. It didn't drive people to the booth, and half the time it was other vendors
Yeah,
coming over to get some
everybody,
free coffee anyway.
All these other
So
reps just coagulating
so
around your
that
booth,
didn't
like
work.
blocking doctors. It makes a lot of
That
sense.
didn't work. But what did work is finding those champions. Remember, I talked about
Yeah,
those
yeah,
champions.
yeah.
A lot of times these champions aren't necessarily docs, right? They could be an RT, they could be a nurse, they could
Right,
be a nurse educator,
right.
whatever it is. They're not used to spending time at these booths. So, what if you could get one of them up there just to have a quick talk about the success that they had at their hospital because of the product and what did that look like and how did that move the needle for them? That's worked really well in driving people to the booth. Having a lunch or a dinner kind of symposium kind of thing where people go to, and then you got to go to the booth to check this box kind of thing, and you work with the societies on having little stamp
Sure,
cards or things like that.
sure.
Those are the little things. But the end of the day is you got to hit them. You got to get them, make sure that the sales reps are active in the field and doing that. But as a marketer, I got to make sure that they're getting leads, right?
Hmm.
So that's about 25, 30, 25, I'd say
So, so, so,
30%.
so 50% is the field,
Yep.
25 to 30% is events.
Yep.
What makes up the rest?
And then the rest is the digital part
So
that,
talk to
that we were
me,
talking.
right? And we're gonna do this in layers. But before we continue, can you please share with the audience your name and the company you work for?
Sorry. Hi, my name is TJ Quigley. I'm the Director of Marketing at Fisher& Paykel Healthcare.
And Fisher and Paykel make what?
So respiratory devices. So uh, we called it the COVID device, but it's essentially heated, humidified air at high flows through your nose. So instead of having to wear a mask that you see people need that people don't like, it's delivered comfortably through the nose. It's heated and humidified so that it's not uncomfortable, right? If you put in cold, dry oxygen in your nose, guess what? Very uncomfortable.
Right.
But the heated and humidified provides that. So it's respiratory support is the goal.
Got it. And your main customers are who?
All throughout the hospital. We do have a home care side. There's also a hospital side, so I can talk to that because that's where my responsibilities lie. The ED, right? Because that's the entry point of people coming into the hospital. That's a big one. The NICU and a PICU. We have a bunch of focused products specifically for neonatal, specifically for pediatrics, because they need the utmost respiratory support. So we have a bunch of products there. And then also in the ICU and in the floor. Some of our products work in between the vents for patients that are on a vent. Some of them are just need respiratory support if they have COPD or something like that as well. So pretty much almost everywhere in the hospital. And then we also have an anesthesia solution that we just launched over the last couple of years,
Exciting.
which is really exciting as well.
Yeah. And the field team, is it a sales rep soldier, or is it a sales rep, an associate sales rep, a clinical specialist? Who makes up the actual field team?
Yep. So the field team, I would say, is definitely a lot of the sales reps, soldiers. But we do have a fair amount of those clinical specialists to go out and help out as well out there in the field. Obviously, product marketing supporting them as well. I highly encourage my team to spend a lot of time in the field from a product marketing perspective. And a lot of times you got to push people to get out there because it's always tough to be a road warrior. But it's the only way, especially if you're launching a new product, that's the only way you're going to be able to adapt
Sure.
quickly to kind of what's going on and what's changing in the field. So definitely more of a sales force focus, but we are sprinkling in some clinical support as well.
Very cool. Okay, now let's get back to the topic at hand.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
pre-COVID digital, explain to us what was going on with your company, and then
Yep.
post-COVID, what's changed and how effective each one was before and after COVID.
Yep. So I joined Fisher and Paykel after COVID, so I can talk about my other experience with my other companies,
Please.
kind of prior
Whatever
and during
gave you
COVID.
that purview.
Yep. So, prior to, and remember, this is med device, so it's different than pharma, right?
Right.
Pharma has been blazing the trail from a digital perspective for years. Medical device, it's a little different. And the
Sure.
reason for that is just how people are consuming stuff. Like you don't see a lot of ads for Fisher and Paykel on the TV. fact, you're going to see none because we don't do that. But you will see a lot of pharma stuff, right? That's direct to consumer, right? Med device companies aren't going to spend a lot of money on direct to consumer because it's so many levels removed from the consumer.
Sure.
It's really hard to say, no, I want to use the Fisher and Paykel vent.
Yeah, it's not consumer
That's
choice.
probably not.
It's not consumer choice. Yeah.
It's not consumer choice. So you're stuck with, okay, who am I trying to target? What does that look like? And that's where marketing comes in. And where are they digesting that information, right? So you mentioned YouTube earlier at the beginning of this. I found YouTube's been a great spot to walk through that, especially if it's like a like company sponsored 15-20 minute discussion on what they've worked on and how that worked with the product and how did it streamline their operations. We've seen a lot of success driving people to there. LinkedIn's been hit or miss. It's just been all right, I would say. Not as good for the ED docs. Sometimes it's pretty good for nurses and things like that. Some of your surgeons and stuff will have a presence on there. We've had some really good success actually in Instagram and Facebook. A lot of these doctors are realizing that it's a competitive market out there, right? Like, for example, especially for those surgeries that are elective, right? So bariatric surgeons, for example, right? If you're a bariatric surgeon, someone may be overweight and they need to lose some weight. But I get the choice of where I want to go to. So they've been a little more aggressive on leveraging Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that.
Go ahead.
So because they're on there a lot, that's a great place for me to target them because then they can kind of see stuff. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And I want to let you know our programs cover the entire career of a medical sales professional. From getting into the medical sales industry, to training on how to be a top performer in the medical sales industry, to masterfully navigating your career to executive level leadership. These programs are personalized and customized for your specific career and background and trained by over 50 experts, including surgeons. Our results speak for ourselves, and we're landing positions for our candidates in less than 120 days in top medical technology companies like Stryker, Medtronic, Merck, Abbott, you name it. Would you run an Ironman race without training and a strategy? You wouldn't. So why are you trying to do the same with a medical sales position? You need training, you need a strategy, and you need to visit evolveyoursuccess.com, fill out the application, schedule some time with one of our account executives, and let's get you into the position that you've always dreamed of. So really for you, it's YouTube, Facebook and Instagram, and then LinkedIn.
Correct. And then we'll do some, like Google ads and stuff like that. Like we've dabbled in that off and on over the last year to see if we can do that. That just gets so hard and so expensive, man. Like it's just not, I don't think it's feasible.
It's so competitive doing Google ads.
That's the problem,
everyone,
right?
Everyone.
Even LinkedIn's competitive. Like we did a product launch last year and we had this great LinkedIn campaign. It was going really well. I'm a big fan of teasing a product when you launch it.
Yeah.
So what do I mean by that is like, let's just break down what are the 3 or 4 value differentiators that we have. And then let's just kind of show it and then pull it away.
Yeah.
And then maybe show it again and pull it away. And that's like a 3 or 4 week lead up into the product so that people are interested in it. And then you launch it and everybody's like, oh, this is super cool. That worked really well last year. You know what didn't work really well? The number of spend that I had in the month of December. Because guess what? Everybody and their mother wants to spend money in December. So I'm trying to launch this product and my prices went up 4x to do these ads in December. So I learned an important part. Don't launch a product in December. Because then you're competing against everybody at that time, right?
Yeah.
Either you're dealing with a pharma company that has their budget is use it or lose it. So if they don't use it in December, it's gone. Or you've got people that are doing gifts and stuff like that.
People are powered. You better bring your money if you want to play.
Gotta bring your money. So didn't work as well.
Okay, so with these digital platforms, all of them, you're not even targeting because you're targeting anyone can get. But who are you typically landing? Are you typically landing surgeons? Are you typically landing nurses? Are you typically landing someone else? Who's the recurring theme of a customer that keeps responding when you guys go online?
So nurses are usually the most likely to believe to just kind of talk through it. Had a lot of success with nurses. ED docs are the worst, just absolutely awful. I have not been able to target them
It makes sense
and
though.
get it. It
It
does,
makes a
right?
lot of
Like
sense.
they're
Yeah.
a different animal.
Yeah.
As you get into some of the niches, so like neuro, for example, right? Um, urology, maybe specific GYN procedures, sentinel lymph nodes, like that kind of stuff, had unbelievable success with niche messaging. And so that's what I think is so important that a lot of marketers miss is, and this goes back to kind of what I was saying about identifying what that value is, that value prop. If I'm just talking to a GYN surgeon and they don't use fluorescent imaging to talk to use this, they might click on it and they may look at it, but that's not the one you want to go for. I need to focus on the GYN oncologist that cares about this, that is doing that, versus just the GYN general surgeon or whatever it is. So finding those niches, especially if your product has a niche, and spending the time to really figure out what titles I want to go for, or who wants to be a part of that. That's where the majority of the time should be spent on marketers versus just blanketly trying to get nurses. What types of nurses are we looking for, right? Anesthesia, I mentioned earlier, what am I sending this just to anesthesiologists, or do I want anesthesiologists that are focused on ortho? Because
Sure.
sometimes that happens, right? Let's do that. Let's focus that. A
So
lot
is
more
it
success in the niches than the general, like,
right?
I'm going to send this to ED docs, or I'm going to send this
Well, I
to.
mean, the age old adage, the riches are in the niches, right? I mean, it's always going to be that because when you're talking directly to a very specific customer and they believe that you have the solution, why wouldn't they talk to you? How are
So,
you getting their attention though digitally, right? Because if you don't, in the beginning, you didn't even know who's on there. You didn't know who's on Instagram, who's on Facebook, who's on LinkedIn, who's on YouTube. Are you just putting out any kind of content and seeing what sticks, or do you guys have a kind of, I don't know, formula for
strategy.
being able
Yep.
to identify who's there?
Yeah. So, the strategy that I find that works is video. And the reason for that is your interaction on LinkedIn and your interaction on anything with a video is, I forget what the numbers are. I think it's like 3 or 4 or 5x. I can't remember off the top of my head. So what I try to do is anything that we're going to be doing as a video, but it needs to be short. I'm not talking like a 2-minute video. I'm talking about, I call them micro moments, is focusing in on, can I distill this down to a micro moment? Remember when I was talking earlier about I like to tease things
Yeah.
in? Those were micro moments. They were 15 seconds or less, talking about the value real quick, hit them, generate interest, and then that's it. Move on. If you try to bombard them with all four at the same time, everybody's like, get me out of here. I don't want to deal with that. I've got a couple seconds. That didn't bother me. Huh, that's kind of cool. Maybe I want to know more about that. And then there obviously needs to be a call to action out of that where it's maybe I'm driving them to the more in-depth YouTube video, or maybe I've got a microsite that I'm working on that I'm going to drive them to things like that. But the key with everything that I've seen success with has been it's got to be some sort of a video. And I've done cartoons. Like you can see some of the stuff that I did at Carl Storz and things like that. It was like a stickman cartoon thing of talking about value. We had huge success on that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all clinical. Everybody thinks these clinical people love clinical stuff. And sometimes, yeah, if I've got a beautiful visualization of a
Sure.
gallbladder and
Works.
it's glowing,
Of
yeah, that'll
course.
be great. But
Yeah.
if I don't, throw some whimsy in there. Throw something fun in there to
Yeah.
get them to think about, oh, that was a little different than what I've normally seen.
Yeah. No, it's a balance. You can't, even to the corporate crowd, you can't be all corporate or you'll turn the crowd off. It's a balance.
Yep.
That's well said. Okay. So for your type of space, what type of person should consider joining a sales team at Fisher and Paykel? Is it entry level folks that are passionate about respiratory care? Is it experienced med reps that want to transition to something that's a little sold a little differently? Where would you say these types of people should absolutely be considering here?
Yep. I think a big thing that I've seen, right? Because I'm also doing training, right? A big thing that I've seen is a lot of people are chasing the money, right? There's good money. I'm not gonna lie, medical device sales. It's great. But at the end of the day, you got to care about what we're doing. Do you
Facts.
really have a passion for taking care of patients, right?
It's
Like,
not
what
though.
is your why? What
Yep.
is your why for waking up every
Yep.
morning?
Yep.
Is it to make money? Because if it's just to get that bag, this is the wrong industry to get in. There's other industries that you can do that in,
Love it.
You want to sell cell phones, or you want to do energy drinks, or you want to do that. Great. Go do that. Because this is not an easy job, man. You just heard me kind of walk through how many different people at the hospital these reps have to talk to. It is waking up. If you're covering cases, you're there at 5 in the morning, and you could be there until 5, 6 p.m. at night. Oh, by the way, I gotta train the night shift. What time does that happen? 9. You're there for 14, 15 hours, and that's just one account. And you've got 20 to 30 different accounts. So yeah, you got to be young. I'm not young
Yeah.
anymore, but yeah, I think that's a key part of that. You got to be young. You got to have a passion for why you want to get into medical device. Like, what is driving you to do this? I think a lot of people just, they see the folks on LinkedIn and all these stories on how much money they're making, and it's not all glory
Yeah,
days.
they
It's a struggle.
romanticized it to the
They
degree that they don't
romanticize it.
understand the reality of it. Yeah.
it's a tough
Yeah.
it's a tough job, right? I like to say, like, some of the most successful people that we've seen in med device have been baseball players, because, right, you fail 70% of the time and you're an all-star, right? That's what a lot of this is, right? It is a grind, man. It is a grind of a job. And the ones that I've seen that have been successful have a certain MO. They're very inquisitive, and they're not a know-it-all. If you come in and you think you can memorize everything, and you assume things, and you're just running in and, here, let me get this for you. Docs hate people that come in and assume. If you don't know the answer, just say it. You know what? I don't know that. Let me get back to you. So that's where the inquisitive part comes in. The reps that sit through training and ask one question the whole time, I can already tell they're not going to make it. You have to ask questions. You have to ask questions, because like I said earlier, you don't know who that decision maker is going to be, right? You don't know who that gatekeeper is going to be. And how's the only way you're going to get around that is by asking questions to figure out who it is, right? So, yeah, I think we've looked for we've looked we're, we've looked for both individuals that have clinical background, which is great. Maybe they were a nurse, maybe they were an RT, maybe they had some kind of experience in biomed or something like that. That can sometimes work, but then what you're losing on that is they weren't clinically sales trained, right? And now it's of the utmost important that you have some good clinically sales trained people, because you got to find how to get to the right person. You're not learning that as an RT. You're not learning that as a nurse, right? So I've seen a couple of them have a great clinical background. They'll
Sure.
spend all day educating, all day, but not selling, right? So that was kind of hard. Then the flip side, we've had some people come in that were Xerox typical
That's a bit
salespeople,
published. Yeah.
right? Right? Came in, they were too pushy, way too selling, selling, selling. It's a very nuanced sale. It can be a long lead time. I mean, if you're talking about a video tower that's $120,000, they're not buying it tomorrow. You got to prime that pump, and you just got to keep on being consistent on building those relationships, finding who cares about that, and more importantly, do you have the right messaging to do that, right? To help you accelerate that sales cycle, right? That's where it comes to marketing here, is how do we get them, instead of taking 6 months to sell it, can we get it down to 3 or 4, right?
Right.
So
So, I love how you clearly spend a lot of time with the sales team, because you can not just identify what the good reps are doing, but you can literally speak to how they're making it work. Have you seen any reps leverage the digital social media platform to move business in their territories? And if you have, please.
it's a great point. Like, we have a rep in Cleveland, ironically, again. This guy is on social LinkedIn all the time. Um, Sometimes I tell him, you got to take that down, because that's not the right branding or whatever, things like that. So
The
there is
compliance of it all.
there's a fine line on that, but it is all about self-branding, right? If I'm a rep and I'm just a salesperson just popping in and that's it, um, that's not helpful, right? If I'm a sales rep and I'm looked at as a partner, as a subject matter expert on all things respiratory, I'm sharing um, webinars that are coming up. I'm sharing new white papers that came out that marketing sent to me, and I'm sending it out to my sphere of influence. I'm sharing the regional meeting that I just went to and all the cool stuff that I learned, or here's some patients, not patients, but usually here's someone on the therapy right now, or whatever it is. Yeah, those reps are very successful. I don't know how he does it. Like I said, it's a tough grind, but I think it is increasing that mind share, and he was very successful last year doing that. So yeah, it's just you got to make sure. The biggest advice I'm going to get any salesperson before they do that, just make sure you get with your marketing person to make sure you know what the rules of the road are, because you can get in some trouble
Absolutely, of course.
talking about future stuff, talking about things like that. You can get in trouble with that. But yeah, I've actually at my other company, I actually had some reps that were getting professional LinkedIn subscriptions so that they could more directly target on their own, right? Like
There's a market there. There's a big
there's a
market
market.
there.
There's a big market there, right?
That's so cool. So you gave us such a great breakdown. 50% in the field, door to door. 25-30% events, which is also pretty much in the field, and then
And that's events. And I just want to clarify the events part of that is so there's the big shows, right? That, you might have depending on the vertical or the product group that you're at.
Okay.
But a big part of that is also the regional shows, right? So that all these little chapters and all these things, a lot of that's supported by the reps, but a lot of times that's supported by marketing as well. So I just want to make sure it's not just those conventions.
Right.
You get a lot of traction at these regional shows, these regional dinners that you might have to increase that mind share to get people in.
Regional dinners hosted by your company, though.
Yeah. So like I'll have a KOL, for example. I'll have a KOL that I might have been talking to over a little while. They've done a couple of presentations, maybe internally. Maybe they talked to that executive committee that I was talking about that to try to get the product on board or whatever. And then I might have them talk at the big convention, where everybody's there. But where I've seen some great success is if you've got a really good KOL that believes in the product, that believes in the therapy that's being delivered and how it's helping their patients, and you can get them to fly into these bigger areas, Houston, San Antonio, San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Boston, hold a dinner, private dinner at a steakhouse or just whatever, and the first half an hour is just to go through kind of how they've seen success at their hospital or whatever it is. People come in, they get a little bite to eat. You might educate them on something so that they can get some CME credit. I don't know. It depends on what you're doing. And then afterwards they ask questions. That's been fantastic. That's been huge.
Yeah.
Way more valuable than a lot of these bigger shows that we've been doing lately. Because people have to be motivated to go to it. Yeah, it's a lot more work. I mean, it's a lot. We had to revamp our whole marketing team to help support a lot of these, and how
the payoff is enormous.
But the payoff was enormous, and we had to train the reps on how to do events. Like that's the biggest thing. So we spent a whole time doing this training program on how to do events because we noticed that some were good and some weren't. Why was that? Well, because they knew how to do events, and they knew there's a lead time on when you send the email out to everybody and when you get the signups and that whole thing, right? Like,
okay,
we take that for granted.
No, you're absolutely right. So, if 25%, 30% make up the digital market, we're in 2024 right now. Let's fast forward to 2031. What are you seeing with the digital effort? Are you seeing that 30%, that 20-30% grow to 50-60? Are you seeing it stay right where it is? Are you seeing it decline? Give us your thoughts and why.
Yeah, definitely I see it growing. I like to think of pharma as like the canary in the mine, right? So I, as a marketer, like to see kind of what's out there. I just went to a MedDev summit a couple weeks ago here in the West Coast down in San Diego. And most of the presenters there were talking about AI, talking about how you can get in front of AI. What does that look like from a marketing perspective? How have some of these companies leveraged AI and did via digital marketing? And what does that look like? And how do you develop content and that whole thing? So I definitely think that's going up. I definitely see, where is that going to, I don't know if the rep number is going to go down, but it's going to have to, because it's going to have to come from somewhere. So I see the rep number going down a little bit, probably 40%, I would say. But consequently, I see those bigger convention numbers going down. I've already, where I used to do a 30 by 30 or a 40 by 40, I'm doing a 20 by 10 now. I'm not doing a 20 by 20 big ass booth anymore, because I told you I was spending $300,000. I got 40 leads, and they asked me, why are you downsizing? Because I'm not getting any return on this. Like, I'm sending my whole marketing team out there. We maybe have a couple sales reps out there, got our president, got our VP of sales and market, all of us, clinical affairs, everybody. We're putting on all these events. I got 40 leads.
Yeah, it's nice.
Doesn't move the needle. So yeah, I see it as the natural, right? We're spending more time on our screens, right? I mean, I've been trying to get my daughter to do it less, and then I looked at my screen time and I was on it for like 6-7 hours yesterday. I'm like, pot kettle, right? Like,
you're like, how am I going to rectify this?
Wait a minute. That's where that comes from, right? So I think there's going to be a natural progression towards more digital. What that's going to look like, I don't know, man. I saw some really cool stuff at this this MedDev Summit. Like, just the stuff that they're doing from a pharma perspective. Yeah, it's direct to consumer, but it's going to bleed over into kind of what we're doing at medical device. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely see it going up. More in the 40 to 50% range. Yep.
This is awesome. Fantastic conversation. Okay, so we're going to be coming to a close pretty soon, but I want to ask you just another question. You brought it up, and I'm a big fan of it, so now we have to talk about it. So you said AI, and you mentioned that like everyone can just obviously see, it's becoming. I think it's eventually going to become an essential, right? Right now, it's like, oh my gosh, the opportunity to use it. 5 years from now, it's probably going to be like, what do you mean you're not already using it? So in marketing, from your position, a med tech company like Fisher and Paykel, what, for marketing, how is AI being considered? Is it already being considered? Is it being used? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think from a development standpoint, yes, it's being used. From an IT standpoint, there is not as much excitedness about it. There's risk on from an IT perspective from a bigger company like Fisher and Paykel, or I even talked about AI when I was at Carl Storz or at that. There's concerns of your data getting out. Where does it go? And I'm talking about like ChatGPT or whatever you're using from an AI perspective on things like that. Now, from a marketing perspective, where can it help? Press releases, things like that are fairly time consuming to pull together. I've leveraged it. It's been great. Fantastic. Right. Really cuts down on the amount of time to do it. Not perfect,
right,
but it's a lot easier to develop a press release from something versus nothing, right? Like, I can take kind of the old press release that I did before and do it, but it's a lot easier if you go in and you say, hey, these are kind of the 4 benefits. This is what I'm doing. Here's the press release. And it can generate it out. And then you go back through and wordsmith it again.
Right.
I just save myself, or I save my copywriter, I save hours. You're exactly right. Exactly right. Also, where it's been helping me is from a brainstorming perspective. I think that's been super helpful from a marketing perspective. Is I feel like we don't spend as much time brainstorming before. I feel earlier on in my career, I used to get in a room with people and we'd throw stuff on the wall and brainstorm and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's COVID or whatever, but we don't do that as much anymore.
It's the time and responsibility.
It's the time, right? It takes, that's a great thing. So it's also been great to do that. I don't have to go to the thesaurus anymore to try to find another word.
Right.
I can pop it into the chat GPT of like, hey, what would be some examples of energizing or forward thinking, right? And then it'll come up like, hey, what about this? Did you think about that? So that's how I think it's been leveraged from that perspective. From a development standpoint, it's everywhere. I mean, you can't talk to a medical device company and not have AI in there. Right. If you're not thinking about how you're going to leverage AI, how are you going to help leverage AI to help diagnose better, right? Like, we all think docs are infallible, but they're not. We miss stuff. We're human, right? And it's not that AI is going to replace that, right? That's the biggest thing. When I worked at Iterative Scopes, or Iterative Health now, that we were at the forefront of AI, detecting polyps in patients, and it would put a little green box around it, like, hey, you might want to take a look at that.
Sure.
Is that replacing what the surgeon's doing? No. But what is it doing? It's just helping them do it better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How great is that?
Yeah.
So I think from a development standpoint, if you're a med device company and you're not in the AI space or haven't been for the last kind of 2 to 3 years, it's going to be a tough 6, 7 years down the road because that's where everything's gone.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So lastly, a couple last things, but before the very last thing, talk to us about how you got here, right? Family man, how do you drive marketing for Fisher and Paykel and still have whatever else you got going on in life?
Yeah. So, yeah, if you look at my resume or you look at my LinkedIn profile, it's weird, right? I've got a finance background. Like, I worked in strategy at Ernst & Young and consulting for a while. I was mostly in kind of strategy, finance, and like sales operations a little bit.
Sure.
And my daughter got sick at 3 years old, and when we were talking about the why, I did a little kind of reflection. So she had brain cancer. She's great now. She's 15, and the only thing I'm worried about is her driving soon. So that's great. But I did a little reflection in my life. I was in my mid 30s, and I was like, do I want to be slinging cell phones and cell phone towers the rest of my life, or I want to do something different? And so that's how I got into med device. So when I think about the why, that's what I'm doing. That's why I do it. That's why I got into this. And it is so rewarding. It's so rewarding. It's been fantastic. And then from, how I got into marketing, it just seemed a natural progression. So I've done sales. I think you can tell that's why I like spending time with salespeople. They like me. We get along really well. I've carried a bag, so I know what some of the struggles are in dealing with marketing. And a lot of time it just comes down to communication. And so I think the reason why I've been so successful in marketing up to this point is I'm really good at building those relationships with the field. I'm really good at listening, but I'm also not just a whipping boy where I'm just going to take everything. I think a lot of marketers do that, and we think we're sales support. And if you just pigeonhole yourself as something as a sales support person, you're not going to be successful as a marketer. You really got to come in and add that value, right? And I think part of that is coming up with it, definitely at the home office, but the other part is getting out in the field and trying it out. There's nothing that replaces that. Every time I've joined a company, I go on this road tour called Quigley's Torturous Tour. And I go around and I spend
everything.
some time with the team, right?
Yeah.
And I want to get the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because we all know who our good reps are.
Yeah.
We know who are our reps that may be good, but don't do the messaging right or whatever. They just kind of drum to their own beat, and then we know the ugly ones that aren't good at all, right? And so we got to figure that out. Like, how can we? Why is that? Why is that happening? And so I have a passion and I have a skill set, I guess, at coming up and taking like really complex stuff and simplifying it, right? I've been doing that since I've been in finance, right? Like, you take these big numbers and how do I paint a story on the CAPM for this product? Or how do I paint a story on the internal rate of return of this, right? Like, I was getting deposed when I was a little kid or when I was straight out of college on why I built the model the way I did. So I had to learn how to talk about it. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, there's a lot of great studies out here. How do we distill that down into like a quick blurb so that someone can do that? I think I've got a natural gift to be doing that. And so that's kind of how I've fallen into this role. And I think another key part of that is that kind of structured consultant background of coming in and seeing where the problems are and being able to dig in and keep on asking those questions to really get to the root of it. And then if it doesn't work, be like, okay, cool. Let's pivot. Let's go from there. That's been great. So that's kind of how I got into it. I love it. I love it. It's great business.
The passion shows. That is fantastic. All right, we're going to wrap this up. TJ, we got one more thing to do.
Yep.
All right. So this is called lightning round. You have 10 seconds to answer 4 separate questions with each of them. You have 10 seconds.
Oh, gosh. I was doing the math. I'm like, that's 2.5 seconds, man.
All right. With that being said, first question. What is the best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Oh, gosh. I hate it when they do that. I should prep for this.
No, you should
Um,
have. It's
so you know what? I reread it again, and I just love it as a marketer. It's called Made to Stick.
made
Um,
to stick.
Made to Stick. The author is evading me right now, but I can give it to you afterwards. It really goes through how do ideas stick in someone's head? Like, why do ideas stick in the head? Why do certain stuff that you see sticks in your head and it's just like a little wormhole? It's all the psychology behind it. It's a fantastic book.
I love it. Okay, that will be in the show notes, folks. All right. The best TV show or movie you've seen the last 6 months.
Well, what did we get into? We've been binging on. I like Stranger Things, man. I really did. I got back into that in a little bit. No, you know what? My daughter forced me to watch Gilmore Girls. I guess that's come back again. That's like her whole generation. That was kind of fun. I got to spend some time with my daughter to watch that with her.
That
So
is
that was kind
awesome.
of cool.
You know what? No one can be mad at that. That is fantastic. Um, okay, and then the best meal you've had the last 6 months. We want the city, state, restaurant, and item.
Can't be something I made. All right, fine. I'll go somewhere else. Where did I go? So there's a place up in Anaheim, up the street here. It's called The Ranch.
The ranch.
Half of it is like a restaurant called The Ranch. The other half is like a cowboy bar, and it's in this like nondescript uh, business building. It's like on the bottom floor of it. Really great food.
Okay.
Um, they did a like a lamb like sliced lamb tenderloin with a uh cherry reduction glaze on top. It had some amazing garlic mashed potatoes with it, and then here was the key, and I don't know if it's still on the menu anymore, but they have this like lobster salad with this lemon vinaigrette that you get with it. It was unbelievable.
Can I
So
go
just
there
that,
for lunch? Did they do this
dude,
at
it
lunch?
is so Samuel. I think you're here in LA, man. You
I
gotta
am.
come down to
I'll
the
be.
ranch.
I'm sold, man. I'm
Dude,
sold.
I'm telling you, and it's so cool on the inside. It's got that like Yellowstone kind of vibe when you walk in.
Wow.
It's super cool. Everybody's super nice. They got scotch and bar. It's great. It's a
Wow.
good spot.
That's
Actually, had my 40th birthday there. Good spot.
Hey, come on. So that's happening. And that will also be in the show notes, folks. And then last but not least, what's the best experience you've had in the last 6 months?
Best experience. What did we do? You know, you go through a lot of fun stuff in life, right? Like getting married, having kids, all that kind of stuff. I would say getting to see my kids play sports now where it's not me yelling at them, but they're actually developing into it. My daughter plays water polo. My son played rugby this year. Fisher and Paykel is a New Zealand based company.
Oh
So
yeah. So he's
rugby's like the official sport of New
yep.
Zealand. So my son
Yep.
played rugby this year,
Wow.
and I got to see him. They have the Rugby Sevens is here in Carson every year. So from all over the world, they play Rugby Sevens there. He got the opportunity to be a ball boy for that, and so like he's sitting there after every kick, and as it goes through, he has to get it and then run it all the way to the side of the
Wow.
field and back, and he's got his little shirt on, and it's just got this smile on his
That's
face, and I'm
cool.
like,
That's
that
so
was
cool.
like my proud dad moment of how much fun it
Yeah.
was to see,
Come
just
on.
to see him do that. I mean, these are
Yeah.
professional athletes, and he's
Yeah.
running on the field and
Yeah.
smiling the whole way. We're all yelling at him, it
You
was
couldn't be in a
it was
better
one of those
place.
experiences.
That's
I
awesome.
almost said Shohei Ohtani because that was pretty cool, him hitting 51 last night, but I'm gonna go with that one.
You
A
know,
little more personal.
talking about going back to the kids, it's funny you talked about driving with your daughter because my son is 14, so he's turning 15 in like a month,
Yep.
2 months, and I went to back to school night for his high school, and at back to school night they tried to simulate. They had a bunch of kids there directing us parents, and they were treating us like we were the kids. And we had 15 minutes in each class period of our child to learn whatever they're learning. And it's first of all, can I just give a shout out to all high school students? I don't know how I did that time of life, but
Dude,
going back
I
was not
agree.
fun or easy or just wow. But anyway, we get to the parking lot after the whole event's over. And the kids that were telling us to go, these kids are, 15, 16 years old, and they're at their cars and they're saying, "Oh, we had such a good time. I'm going to go home now." They're talking about going home. And I'm looking at these young 16-year-old kids getting in their own cars, going home, and my son, and it was not connecting. And I got,
No.
and I panicked. And so check it out. Ever since then, we've been driving like every day.
Yeah.
We've been practicing every day because
Yep.
I want him to be so prepared by the time
Yep.
the opportunity comes. Because with those kids, it was traumatizing. But yeah,
I did the same thing, except like one of her friends ended up getting in an accident, of
yeah,
course, right after she got her license.
yeah.
And
Ooh,
I immediately was like, all right, we're going up the parking lot right now. We're going to start driving
right now.
because
Yep, yep.
let's go.
Yeah.
I don't want it. We're going. It's so funny you said that. It's the same
Yep,
thing,
yep,
right?
real man. The fear is real. Well, listen, TJ, it's fantastic. Learn about Fisher and Paykel. Learn about your career track. You're clearly doing amazing things there, and I can't wait to see the future of where this all takes us as far as AI and technology and marketing. Thank you so much for the time today. How can people find you?
Well, I think the best way is on LinkedIn. Looked up on my LinkedIn profile. It's TJ Quigley on there, and I think that's the best way to get a hold of me. So if you go on in there and give me a connect, I'd be happy to connect. I've got a lot of connections in this field. I've helped a lot of people find opportunities, and I'd love to help you if you're trying to break into it.
Fantastic. Thanks again, TJ.
Thank you.
And that was TJ Quigley. Man, that was good stuff. It's just fascinating to see the direction things are going in the digital space when it comes to med tech, and it's really hitting all avenues. Even with AI, when we think AI and med tech, we think development, we think the products, we think how are we making them better and more accurate with patients. But we don't always think about what's happening on the marketing side of that and how it's influencing every facet of what happens in the med tech space, from the manufacturer all the way down to the patient. As always, we do our best to bring you innovative guests. And if you're someone that's looking to get into medical sales and you want to work for a company like TJ Quigley works for, then what are you waiting for? You already know what I'm going to say because I say it pretty much every episode. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com and let's get you to where you want to be. And if you're a medical sales professional and you want next year to just be amazing, or maybe Q4 is coming fast and you're thinking something needs to happen and something needs to happen big so I can get to the goal and drive the results I want to see in Q4, then again, what are you waiting for? Visit evolveyoursuccess.com, go to our sales builder, sales training program, fill out an application, and let's get you in front of someone and let's get you where you want to be. As always, we do this to educate you, to train you, to teach you, and to provide you resources. So make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a customized and personalized program that gets you into the medical technology industry as a sales professional, or any type of role for that matter. Become a top performer in your position and masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com by visiting our site, filling out an application, schedule some time with one of our account executives, and allowing us to get you where you need to be. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews on the Medical Sales Podcast.